Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Therapist Theater. I'm your host, Josh Treese. I'm a practicing therapist in Music City, USA, and every week a guest therapist, counselor, or social worker joins me in the theater to talk about a movie that we've seen and what relationships or mental health issues it highlights. Thanks so much for downloading today's show. Make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss any future episodes, and while you're doing that, help other people find the show by giving it a 5-star rating and writing a review for it in the podcast app. You can also stay connected with what's happening in the theater by following us on social media. Links to our accounts are in the show notes. This week's guest is Sasha-Nicole Cory. Sasha is a private practice clinician currently working out of the Works Counseling Center here in Nashville. She specializes in working with diverse families and provides animal-assisted therapy with her dog, Percy. She's also my supervision partner, former grad school classmate, and an all-around brilliant and wonderful person. So, let's get this show started, shall we? Dim the lights, raise the curtain, and start the previews. Welcome to the theater. Sasha, welcome back to the theater. I am so excited to have you today.
Hey, how are you?
I am doing incredible. How are you?
I'm pretty good. It's beautiful outside.
I have not been out. Oh, have I been outside today? I think I've been outside today. I think I walked the dog this morning. Is that bad that I can't remember?
Hot. It's not hot at all.
Nice. Gosh, it was hot yesterday. Sheesh. I would like it if there could be either a pandemic or crazy hot and humid weather. But I would not like to have both.
Right.
If I got to pick.
Right.
But unfortunately right now it seems like I don't get to choose.
You don't.
You don't. Yeah. So I feel like I'm on a little bit of a roll because last week I had Rachel Olshine on. She was my first guest. You were my second guest on the show.
Okay.
So we are doing a bit of a greatest hits lately.
Okay.
And as you were very gracious to step in and pinch hit this week because I had another guest that unfortunately something came up and they couldn't make it. But we were already in process of trying to work out when to get you back on. So it kind of was just a beautiful like coincidence of things kind of lining up.
Yeah, timing. Yeah.
Yeah. So since we already had you on the show once before, we have your why therapy. Listeners, if you want to hear Sasha's why therapy, just go back into the archives. It's the second episode ever. And you can hear kind of Sasha's journey of why it is that she does what she does. I have told guests in the recent past that I noticed that I was asking this question anyway, so I ended up making it kind of a formal question. I'd love to hear, before you became a client in therapy, before you studied to become a therapist, did you have any kind of concept or idea of what therapy was when you were just Jane Q. Public, innocent bystander before you got into it?
I had a little bit of idea of what therapy was because I was working in social services and teaching, but I think I knew what it looked like for children and families. I don't know that I knew what deep psychotherapy would look like at all. Actually, I didn't at all. Mm-hmm. You know, I kind of knew about like therapy, dealing with people who had acute trauma and things like that.
So if you didn't have like a concept, when it came time for you to, because you were a client in therapy before you started getting trained, right?
For many years, yes.
Okay. So without knowing what it was, before you went and had your first session, were you scared? Like, how did you find out about it? How did you cross that bridge from, I don't know what that is at all, to now I'm sitting on the couch?
I was really excited about it. I was really excited to have the opportunity to go. I kind of thought that it was going to be something that I might not have access to in my lifetime.
Mm.
And I knew that it was helpful. But I didn't think that I would have the time or the resources to be able to have someone sit with me like that. A friend of mine that was a teacher and who had worked at Child Protective Services told me about a supervisor that had worked at Child Protective Services who had gone back and become an MFT. That's how I got into being an MFT. And I was suffering. I was just suffering, and I had tried all of the things, and I had read all of the books, and I had kind of hit a wall. And so she told me about this woman, Dorothy, and Dorothy just helped me heal. And I was so excited and I was so proud. I would tell my friends, because I was the only one of my friends that had gone to therapy, and I would tell my friends, I would be like, my therapist says this, my therapist says that, and they would be like calling me and be like, what did the therapist say this week? So that was really exciting for me.
So for you, it was a person that you knew and trusted was
Hmm.
seeing somebody. So for you, it was like a personal connection that got
Yeah.
you into, I like that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
That's something I think I had a guest on before that said something on the lines of to recommend to folks out there. Like if you're looking for a therapist, if you know some people that are already in therapy, to ask them, tell me about your therapist, rather than, of course, there's resources like Psych Today and just Googling and stuff like that. But if it's one of those where like, well, if one of your friends is friends with somebody else, more than likely you'll be able to be friends with that person,
Yes.
kind of thing.
Yes.
Um, that's incredible. It's also it makes a lot of sense that you would then go on to pursue MFT licensure, marriage and family therapy.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that's similar to me. My therapist, I believe, was an LPC. He was a PhD, but I think he had the licensed professional counselor thing.
Hmm.
But I had done so much work about centering in relationships when I was in his office that when it came time to when I got to grad school, I thought, this is just how I believe people work.
Yes.
And so why would I not, go that way?
Yes.
Um, that's cool. So typically at this point, I would ask, how has your concept changed now that you've been in it, but without a concept? I think what I'll do is I'll ask you this. I asked this to a guest 2 weeks ago. So having gone from the client's couch, right, to the therapist's chair,
Hmm.
what has been, I'm going to use two words, what has been surprising sitting in the therapist chair, and what has been challenging sitting in the therapist chair?
Probably the same thing. I may think of something different to be challenging. I think I didn't realize how much my therapist cared about me.
Oh.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I was at a really low place, and my therapist was really caring. She was really loving, but I always told myself with that first therapist, I was like, oh, this is her job.
Mhm.
I didn't realize that she really cared about me. And now, when I find myself in places with clients, or even just saying certain things, or even facing clients that were in the position that I was in when I started therapy, just in the thinking, not necessarily in the circumstances, but in the thinking that I was in, it reminds me, and I think about often like, oh, she actually really cared about me.
Mhm. So it's given you perspective.
Hmm.
Has it what has it done in your personal uh practice with your clients? Does having that perspective realization change how you engage with them or treat them?
Oh yeah, I think at the beginning I didn't think it was okay for me to care about my clients.
Like
I
you thought we had to keep this like personal distance kind of.
Even after I did my internship, I would always feel guilty when I would actually be concerned about clients or worry about them. I would be like, I'm being crazy or whatever. And so it kind of gives me permission to, and I don't know what the difference is, but I've just given myself permission that it's okay if I care about them. Of course, loving people is part of the therapeutic process, and that's okay.
Do you think that that's from you had like a picture or a stencil in your head about what a therapist, quote unquote, should be, and that
Yes,
wasn't matching up with that?
yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Yes.
So like that's a concept. Like where do you think that like picture or stencil kind of came
Graduate
from?
school. Graduate school. I think when I started going through graduate school, I think I actually lost. I was thinking about that when you said, how had my concept changed?
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking that like actually getting into the therapy room again is what changed my concept again. And I started remembering my first therapist and
Mm-hmm.
remembering that work that I had done with her. Because I think that going through graduate school, not seeing myself represented in graduate school
Mm-hmm.
and the way I show caring about people
Mm-hmm.
um, made me I was always really concerned. Like, I just got some type of idea that I was supposed to be really cold and distant. Like, I was just not
Mm-hmm.
supposed to care.
Tell me a little bit more about that. Like you said, you didn't see yourself represented. Tell me what you mean by that.
I didn't see myself represented in the professors. We both went to Trevecca, and
Mm-hmm.
that's a predominantly white Christian institution. There were no professors of color, and there were no. I don't feel like there were any of the faculty that kind of came from a similar background in thinking. I kind of think of myself as being, I guess, more down to earth in my
Mm-hmm.
therapy. And so it wasn't until the end of the program, probably when I met you, that was you were one of the first people I actually met that like I didn't, and maybe I wasn't aware because I was not open to a lot of people when I was at Trevecca. Like, I was a little bit nervous, but I think like I thought everybody here has had this perfect story and this perfect life, and they're coming to therapy with this really neat package.
And then you and I became supervision partners,
Yes.
and you were like, "This guy's messed up too." Sweet.
Yes, 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 exactly.
I think I realized just now I didn't say that at the beginning. So I have had, and this is how you are a guest on this show. I have had just the privilege and the honor of we were supervision partners during my internship, and then after I graduated, I think it took maybe another year, but we are supervision partners again.
Yeah.
So basically, every 2 weeks, we get together with our supervisor, Alicia, who's also been a guest on the show.
Mm-hmm.
And we staff cases together. We talk about kind of what's going on inside of us. Like we are partners in the process of refining and becoming therapists
Yes.
after you get the degree together.
Yes. Yes.
And one of the reasons why I was looking forward so much to having you on the show, as well as I look forward to our supervision time and just talking to you in general, is because of the effect that you've had on me, both as a therapist and a person. Because I think that you and I, our backgrounds couldn't be more dissimilar,
Mm-hmm.
but I think we have found, I don't even know if commonality is the right word for it, like just kindred spirits.
Yes.
And maybe it's the struggle, maybe it's, I don't know what it is. Or if I thought more about it, I could probably put a word to it, but that's not important for right now. But it's just recognizing in each other, you know, this 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 person has something in their journey that I also have.
Yes.
And I learned so much from you. And so anytime that I can sit with you is like a net win because of that.
I think we're
Um,
both wounded healers.
yeah, it's
Mm-hmm.
probably it.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
um, yeah, I've said many times, like for my why therapy, it's because I was given such a gift in therapy.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was able to identify aspects of my life and make changes that changed my universe.
Mhm.
And that's, I want to be a part of helping other people get that same gift.
Mhm.
Um, yeah. So it's interesting to hear you talk about uh, not feeling represented. Also, I think that like I'm thinking of our supervisor at the counseling center. I felt. Did you feel like she kind of like had that?
Yes, I did. That's why I went to the counseling center. I did.
Okay.
I felt that way. I felt like she was more down to earth, and I was going to say that. I was
Yeah.
going to say that there were some women that were there that
Mm-hmm.
started me kind of thinking about a different way to be a therapist than we had
Yeah.
gotten from classes. And one of them was her, and the other person was the person who did our internships. Um, and
Yeah.
so
Dr. Sarah Hopkins, and then is it Dr. Johanna Powell now?
it is
Is
Dr.
she?
Johanna Powell.
Nice. Yeah. I
I
want to
always
give.
say they're kind of like my representation.
Yeah.
I feel like they kind of came to therapy from the same
Mm-hmm.
that same type of place, that earthy, that little more down to earth place.
Yeah,
Um,
I think that one of the things I just appreciated so much about Dr. Hopkins was that she didn't pretend to have it all together.
yes,
And I don't know if our other profs actively pretended. Like, I don't know if that was like I'm a professor, so I have to put off this
right.
air, or if it was just, that's who they were, or what. I don't know what it was. I can't begin to
I
say
don't
what it
either.
was.
I don't either, but I didn't even realize it was missing until I met Dr. Hopkins. And
Yeah.
I remember her being like, I run late. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
And she was like, I eat donuts. And I was like,
Yeah, I when I had her on the show, I told her like one of my favorite memories is because she was my very first class. So
mm-hmm.
here I am in Adams 404 at 8 in the morning.
That's a wonderful gift to have her as a first class. That's a
Yeah, like my very first day of grad school, she comes strolling in at 8:30,
mm-hmm.
and the very first thing she says is, "Y'all, Murfreesboro is freaking far away. So from now on, class starts at 8:30."
Yep.
And I
Yep.
was like, "All right, here we go."
Yep. Yep. Yep.
um, well, let's talk about a movie.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me what movie you picked for us to talk about today.
Queen and Slim.
Queen and Slim. So I had never heard of this movie until you told me it's the one you wanted to cover. So for those of you that may be listening and have not heard about this movie, right now, the date that we're recording it, it's only available to purchase on iTunes. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's $20. It is on HBO Max though, or maybe I don't know how HBO works anymore because there's
It's
like
on
HBO
HBO Max.
Max, HBO, HBO Go, HBO Now. There's all these HBOs, but it's on HBO. It's also like if you have Hulu and HBO is a part of that, you can get to it. But it's on HBO to watch.
Mm-hmm. Support
I
the film. Support the film.
yeah. It's I don't have words right now. So I'm gonna punt it to you. Why did you pick this movie for us to talk about?
I picked this movie for two reasons. One is because it just touched me so much, and I wanted to promote a Black film.
Yeah.
Um, I felt like it was relevant to what's happening right now. And the other part of it is, I love one of the ways that I love connecting with my clients is through media,
Mm-hmm.
and things that they'll suggest to me. And a client suggested this movie to me, and it just I just I thought it was appropriate for that
Hmm.
reason. I
Yeah.
love the fact that a client suggested it to me. It has a special place for me.
Yeah. So I think and we can take this part out if you want. But I do want to recognize that like right now we're taping towards the end of August
Hmm.
of 2020.
Hmm.
The pandemic's been going on for almost 6 months,
Yes.
as well as we have the outcries and the I don't I don't even quite know how to begin to say it with one or two words, but since George Floyd's death,
Hmm.
Breonna Taylor's death, the remembrance and movement about Elijah McClain, we've got Jacob Blake. We've had this outcry of people saying, no more. This is not okay.
Hmm.
Since that has happened, we have not talked about racial injustice, white supremacy, the state of our nation here on the show. Part of that is because, unfortunately, I have not had a good representation of therapists of different races on the show. I've tried, but I don't want to make any excuses. I've invited people, but they have not responded. And I've had some people of color on the show, but not many.
I wanted to acknowledge here, I was thinking about that, and I'm really actually glad that you're bringing this up, because I was thinking about wanting to bring this movie up.
Yeah.
And I really thought, like, I know that you, in knowing you and just our relationship, I know that you make a real effort to have people of color on this show. But I also thought, I don't know if there are very many people who are going to be willing to talk about this subject.
Yeah.
And I wanted to use my privilege as a mixed race person. I feel like I have some ability to be able to speak on this without necessarily having the risk to myself professionally. And I think I can speak about it in a way of being able to be heard, that I feel like I wanted to use my privilege in that way and my proximity to whiteness in a way that would be helpful.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, like, I've had a few people that have asked about coming towards this topic. The few that have all been white. And there's been a real fear inside of me to address this with another white person.
A word. I think that's appropriate.
But I also want to recognize that you and I were talking before we recorded. I don't want to stay silent because I'm afraid of getting something wrong. I'm doing my best to engage in anti-racism work. I mentioned to you, I just got done yesterday reading Me and White Supremacy. Incredible, incredible, incredible book. Cannot recommend it enough if you want to have your face slapped and you want to be challenged. And I don't mean like faux challenged. I mean like real challenged. I recommend that. But I don't want to, for fear of not getting it perfect, not step out into conversation. Having said that, I also want to say, like, I don't want you to feel like you have to be the representative. I don't want you to feel like you have to speak for any group of people.
Right.
I want to hear your thoughts and from your heart and from your story, and you're an individual. Like, you're not an elected representative of anything. And so, so I think I just want to, like, acknowledge, like, I'm scared walking into this conversation, but I also know it's important. And I also just have implicit love and trust for you. And like I said, not in a you're a representative way, but just in a, I know you're brilliant, and I know that you think about these types of things, and you engage with it a lot more than I do. And so I'm eager to hear more. So all of that to say, if you have not, you listener, have not had a chance to even hear about Queen and Slim, go to Hulu, go to HBO, give it a watch. Come back and listen to the episode. So I asked you why you picked it. This is not an is easy story the right word I want to use? This is not like a light story.
No.
Yeah. So I would say that it reflects the relationship that Black people have in our country with law enforcement.
Yes.
And I don't mean that in like a general, this is how it always goes, but like, we got to lay the cards on the table. We got to call.
I'll say this, as a Black person myself, I felt that it was representative for the relationship that I have with law enforcement.
Yeah.
Mm.
Um, I remember not too long after George Floyd's death, talking with one of my clients who is Black and asking him like what was happening inside of him, like what was going on, how's he dealing, you know. And he talked about growing up very upper class.
Mm-hmm.
His dad was a college professor.
Mm-hmm.
And yet when he would go to a different state from here, every time he crossed the state line, like as an adult,
Mm-hmm.
he knew I'm gonna get pulled over.
Mm-hmm.
He just knew, to
Mm-hmm.
where it wasn't even like wondering, or it wasn't like trying to think, well, okay, so if it happens, I'll do this. He just knew. And it happened every time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's reflective. When I got done watching the movie, I was telling Leanne, I was like, I'm angry, I'm scared, I'm sad.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, I'm going to let you take it from here. Tell me more about you watching the movie. And
I had a different experience of the movie. I was angry, but I think I was probably angry in a different way because I don't feel like it was like a rekindled anger. I don't know. I think I felt actually, I don't think I felt angry. I think I felt peaceful. I mean, I was mad at the cop, but I think I feel that this happens all the time, and I feel that this is a part of my reality and the reality of the people in my life, my family members, my friends. This is a not uncommon incident. You know, I have people in my family who are incarcerated, and so felt I was smiling a lot when I was watching the movie, and I felt joyful because I felt represented in the movie, and I also felt seen. Like I really felt like, oh, this is a positive way in which they're handling this situation, rather than thinking like, oh, I can't believe that this happens, because I'm so afraid of the police every time they stop me. I've had so many negative experiences with the police that it's a reality for me that it could happen at any time. And when I was rewatching the movie, and you can stop me, you know, at any time. When I was rewatching the movie, it's funny because what I was thinking about was I was thinking, I bet Josh might not be able to recognize this part. So when I was a kid, I used to do this thing where I would always plan for, I loved the Wizard of Oz movies.
mm-hmm.
And I would always plan for what was it going to be like when I actually got to go to the Wizard of Oz. But when I was in high school, and I would plan this in my mind, this would be just like something that I would do when I was quiet, you know.
Were you picturing yourself in Dorothy's ruby slippers, or was this like
Yes,
Sasha
yes.
going to?
No, me going. So
Okay.
like, what if I was going, what would I want to have with me? I'm going to have my backpack, because I was an explorer kid. I was always in the woods. So if something were to happen and I was going to end up getting picked up in a tornado while I'm riding my bike or I'm climbing a tree, what are the things that I need to have so that I will be?
What's funny is you probably didn't know you would live in Nashville one day, where like almost every year we have a tornado. You have a better
Exactly.
chance of getting to Oz now than you ever did back then.
Yes. I'd be like, what do I need to have? And then in my adult life, I was watching her. There was one scene where Angela is putting on these boots.
We're back to Queen and Slim now.
Yes, she's putting on the boots, and I'm going to bring it together. So she's putting on these boots, and I was like vexed. This was one part of the movie that actually stressed me. I was vexed because she had uncomfortable shoes on. I was completely vexed about these shoes that she had on, because I was like, she is not prepared to catch out. And then I started thinking about it, and I realized that there was a point when I started thinking, okay, it's not going to be, I was no longer preparing to go to Oz. I actually was preparing, like, what would I do if something were to happen and I was about to get wrongly accused by the police of something? And I started thinking, when did I start having that thought in the back of my mind? Because it's always been in my mind. At any time, I could get thrown in jail and I could be wrongly accused by the police of something. It could happen. And I was like, why did I start thinking that? And I remember that when I was in high school, there was this woman named Joyce Ann Brown that had been wrongly accused of a crime and spent 10 years in prison. And she came and she spoke at our school. And I, from that time, had always just kind of had it in my mind that this could be a reality. You know, I could be falsely accused of something by the police. It's like the police could do anything to me at any time, and I might not have an ability to do anything about it. And this woman had a clear alibi. She's written a book, but she'd had a clear alibi. And so I thought, I've always had this thing that I would be prepared. I would be more prepared than that. So when she was putting those shoes on, and they looked like they were too small, and she was forcing her feet in that shoe. And I was like, it's a heel. I was like, that's not what I would do. I would have had on some sneakers so I could catch out.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm hearing you say that, like, at some point in time you became hyper vigilant.
Sure. Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very sick, you and I talk about Enneagram stuff a lot. It's a very sixth thing. You're constantly being in a space of worst case scenario. How do I prepare for that?
Yes. Yes. I'm a self-preserving 4. So yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. But I think,
Mm-hmm.
I think that, as you've described, that's not an uncommon experience for people of color in our country.
It's not an common experience for my friends and family.
Yeah.
I mean, I went to Prairie View A&M, which is where Sandra Bland was killed. She was an alumni of Prairie View. And so she was killed by those police in Hempstead. I think it was Hempstead. It was Hempstead or Waller, which is one of the towns. There's 2 towns outside. I think it was Waller County Police. And so, yeah, I mean, I've always felt like this could be something that actually realistically could happen. Like every time I get stopped by the police, I'm like, anything could happen.
So, I'm a giant fan of Malcolm Gladwell.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
I love Malcolm
I
Gladwell.
consume anything that he puts out
Me too.
ravenously.
Mm-hmm.
His last book, Talking to Strangers, did you read that? Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, pretty much the through line running through the whole book is the Sandra Bland case.
Mm-hmm.
But what's interesting is he, like, you would kind of expect going back into Sandra's life to examine where she came from, but he kind of does the same thing with the police officer who arrested her. And one of the things that I was struck by was Gladwell kind of highlights that what happened between the two of them that resulted in her imprisonment. I don't know if she was ever charged. I can't remember. But she was held, was a result of both sides of this interaction basically being taught. And on the officer's side, taught is not exactly the right word, because he was like trained to fear the other.
Yes.
And
which is not new. I love that Malcolm Gladwell said it in his book, but it was not new to me. I can tell by the way I've been with white people when they get approached by the police, and I can tell by the way white people are approached by the police versus the way I'm approached by the police, that they're scared of me.
Yeah. Yeah. As I was watching this movie, I think because the human brain craves stability, resolution, and I think by nature people have a gravitational pull towards oh no, my brain. It starts with a B. It's one of two options.
I mean, resolution.
Yeah.
We don't in a liminal state. I always say we just
binary is the word I was trying to think of.
Sure.
We
Yes.
gravitate towards binary solutions because there feels like a resolution. There feels like a simplicity to it.
Yes.
So as I'm watching the movie, I'm asking myself at different points, I mean, whose fault is this?
Oh.
And once you move past a certain point, it's not necessarily whose fault is it, but at what point could they, Queen and Slim, if they wouldn't have made that decision, could they have still pulled out?
Right.
You know, and I feel,
I didn't ever ask myself that. I have to be honest with you.
yeah, and I feel like shame saying that, but it's not because I'm trying to assign blame, but it's because my brain is trying to settle. You know, it's not trying to embrace complexity. It's trying to get to a place where it can relax and
Sure, we
move
want a
forward in the story.
resolution. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what's interesting is, like, let's take the beginning part. You know, we've got two people, which you mentioned, Queen's you know, character's name, Angela.
Mhm.
Ernest is Slim's real name. We don't find out till the literal very end of the movie.
Which I loved. I thought that was so dope that they did
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I loved that.
But they are on a date at the beginning in a
Yes.
diner. They
Yes.
leave the diner, and as they're driving on a straightaway road
Hmm.
somewhere in Ohio, no turns, nothing, she grabs his phone. She's looking through it, says something on the lines of like, "Oh, you made a playlist for tonight."
Hmm.
He gets a little embarrassed. He reaches for the phone. The car swerves a bit, and that's when they get pulled.
This has happened to me so many times,
Really?
especially in a car with a black, like it is. I've never been asked to get out of the car over something silly like that. I've had negative interactions with police, but being in the car with black males, it's happened to me so many times.
Huh.
I was not, none of this was surprising to me. Like something little silly happens, and for whatever reason, they feel like they got to pull you out of this car and make you get on the ground. I already knew what was going to happen. I was like,
Yeah.
okay, this is a thing. Okay.
Yeah. So, you know, from behind, you hear the whoop, whoop, and you see the lights. They get pulled. The officer approaches the window, and from the very first moment, he's got the flashlight in their eyes. And so I mentioned to you before we started recording, when you and I talked about Moonlight, I remember telling you, like, I had this raised level of anxiety and fear in me because my mind was already writing a story, regardless of, because I didn't know what the story was before I watched it. Regardless of what I'm seeing in front of me, my mind's already going, this is going to happen, this is going to happen, and this is going to happen. So, you know, when the officer comes up to the car, I'm feeling that. And then, like, it just goes, it goes from bad to worse, resulting in the officer shooting Queen in the leg, which I don't know if it was like a full on or if it just grazed her, but she bled from it.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine if it was like full on, she'd have been doubled over, but
Yeah.
that's not
I
really
wondered
important.
about that too. Yeah. No, I thought
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah. And when he does that, like, Slim jumps on him because it's an act of self-defense. It's exactly what he says. And as they're wrestling, he grabs the officer's gun and shoots the officer.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think he aimed at all. I just think he shot, and it kills the officer.
Mm-hmm.
And then they go on the run.
Mm-hmm.
And so at some point, as they're on the run, I'm thinking to myself, okay, body cam footage from the car. I wonder if they would have stayed there and the police would have seen what happened from the footage. This is my brain trying to find a place to, like, sit down so it can relax and keep going. If they would have
Sure.
just let them see the footage, if they'd have been like, oh yeah, that guy was way out of line. We do find out later in the movie that this is not the first time this has happened with that cop.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, he's still out there on duty. Like, so regardless of if it happened before, there was no effect from it. Like, he didn't get fired. He didn't get put in jail, which is a story that's happening a lot right now.
Correct.
So I think I just need to check that. Like, at several points in the story, my brain is trying to go, all right, well, if they wouldn't have done that, or if the cop wouldn't have done this, if one thing would have changed, would there have been, you know, a
I
movie?
did not feel that because again, my introduction into this idea that the police were not, I mean, of course, my cousins always told me to be afraid of the police. They would tell me that when I was a little girl. But this woman, Joyce Ann Brown, who had done nothing and ended up being in prison for 10 years, made it very clear to me from an early age. She served 10 years before she got out, and she had an alibi. Like, she was at work and clocked in. So it made it very clear to me at a very early age that the police are going to be unfair to you, and there is nothing that you can do. And the woman had a job at a bank. That was the crazy thing about it. Like, this woman, you can't even say, oh, well, she was in the wrong place. Well, she was hanging around some people, which would not make it okay. But there was nothing that you could rationalize this situation with as a kid in your
This
mind.
is Joyce Ann Brown.
Joyce Ann Brown, yes.
Yeah.
And so
Which Queen was a lawyer in the movie.
yes, that's why the movie reminded me so much of that situation. I was like, this could actually happen at any time. And I've always had a feeling like this could happen to me at any time. I could be caught up in anything like this. And I'll say too, that when I knew that I was going to watch the movie and discuss it with you, watching it again, I was like, oh, I get so used to marginalization, and I get so used to this idea that this could happen. This isn't making me nervous. And this movie is probably anxiety producing for Josh. I was like, oh, that's probably not a good thing that I'm so used to it. And that I didn't even feel anxiety or surprise or shock, Well,
I don't think it's a good thing as far as speaking to what our world is like.
That's what I mean.
Yeah. I also can't help but think. So Queen was a lawyer in the movie. Mm-hmm. Slim, when they were in the restaurant talking, they order food, the food gets delivered. She says, did you get scrambled eggs? And they don't show his plate, but he's like, I did. And she's like, well, that's not what that is. And he goes, it's fine. She's doing her best. And she's like, well, I got a problem with that. People not doing their jobs. And he's like,
I would so do that.
Yeah. You would do what? Keep the food, or you would send it back?
No, I would be like, I resonated with the character. I'd have been like, let them bring this food back.
Yeah, but he was saying like, oh, well, she's married to an alcoholic. She's got 3 kids. She's doing the best she can. She's like, how do you know that? And he said, she comes through my line every week. So I got the impression he was a Costco. He worked at Costco as a cashier or something. So I think calling out there, we've got Queen, who is in what you might say is a white collar job, like a very affluent, high earning job. And you have Slim, who I guess you could probably say working at Costco is still white collar, but it's not considered in the same thing as a lawyer.
Sure.
So, I mean, I think what I'm recognizing there is this is not a, and like Ibram X. Kendi talks about this in How to Be an Anti-Racist. Like, this is not a like lower income thing.
Mm-mm.
This is an experience of Black people, not poor Black people.
Correct.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I loved that about the movie. I loved that because I saw that it was going to be on the first date, and I was like, oh, okay. But then when it became clear that she was a lawyer and she said that had happened with one of her clients, I was like, this is going to be so good because I really felt like I could resonate with it.
Yeah.
I think most of my friends are professionals. When I said that, I went to Prairie View. Most of my friends are professionals. A lot of them work in the legal field. And so, I mean, I feel like this could have been any one of us that this could have happened to.
Wow. I think it's interesting that they had them on. Well, I dug into some more info about the movie. It's based on a story by James Frey, who was the guy that wrote A Million Little Pieces. So he wrote these books that were presented as memoirs. He then went on Oprah and confessed they were all made up. They were all fictitious.
I didn't know that this book was written based on his stuff.
I don't know if this was a book first. It just said that the story was based on something of his.
I did not know that. And I do remember James Frey. I remember that whole shenanigans on Oprah.
Yeah. So he I guess conceived the story, and then Lena Waithe, who was on Aziz Ansari's show, she's become an activist. She wrote the screenplay.
Okay.
So it's interesting to me that this came from the mind of a white dude. And then was refined. It was refined through her mind. The story came from his mind, was refined through her mind.
Mm-hmm.
and we have it here on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's interesting to put these characters on a first date,
Mm-hmm.
because maybe two people that knew each other for 10 years would have gone on this journey and interacted differently, but they're getting to know each other as they're running for their life.
Mm-hmm.
And they're discovering all these things about each other.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to let you take it from here. You take me something. I have 3 quotes from the movie written down that I want to talk to you about, but we can do that at any time. So like, tell me where you want to go.
Oh, I don't even know where I want to go. I want to say that I loved that it was a love story, and you're touching on that. That's how I experienced it, was as a love story. And not just a romantic love story, but as a love story of Black people, the people that helped them. Um, I just, I loved that. Um, and I thought that while the circumstances in the movie were pretty extreme, I felt like it was really important to see Black people loving each other, even in the midst of difficult circumstances. Because I think sometimes when you hear about difficult stuff, a lot of times I'll stay away from things in movies or in the media because it feels like trauma porn for me. I talk about this with my friends a lot, and I liked that this movie was not trauma porn.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like they didn't just make it about that moment.
Uh-huh.
Does that make sense?
I think so. Tell me a little bit more about it.
I mean, I'm thinking about the way that they
Wait,
allow
define trauma porn for me first.
I would say it's like when you're just watching something and being like, oh, this is so horrible. Your life is so horrible. And like, yes, it is difficult being a Black person, but it's also an amazing experience. And we are out here being super joyful and having love and having fun and having wonderful moments with each other, even in the midst of all of these traumatic events that are happening.
So the movie didn't define these characters by this one moment that was
Yes,
traumatic. Okay.
yes,
Okay.
yes, yes.
It showed that there was a breadth to them as people.
Yes, and that was really, for me, the heart of the movie.
Yeah. Yeah, there were all these little moments in it. Like, okay, so here's one of the quotes that I wrote down that I wanted to ask you about. So at one point, they have stolen a truck. They're at a fast food place. They're sitting in the bed of the truck and they're eating and they're talking.
Mm-hmm.
And Slim asks Queen, so you're a lawyer, right? She says, yeah. He goes, are you a good lawyer? And she says, I'm an excellent lawyer. And he says, why do Black people always feel the need to be excellent? Why can't we
I
just
know, I love that when he said that. Yes, yes.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you about that because I feel like that line is so much bigger than that scene.
Oh gosh, I say it all the time. I say it all the time to people that I work with, that I am so tired of Black excellence. I am done with Black excellence. I'm over it. Sick of it, done with Black excellence. I think that it started off as a really positive phrase, this term Black excellence. We use it to, hype ourselves up a lot, and we'll use this term Black excellence, talking about Black doctors and, just talking about Black people that are doing excellent things. However, it is really an exhausting mantle to carry. And I have found that many of the people that I work with that come in my office, and I think it's related to model minority myth.
You gotta tell me what that is.
So like this idea that you're going to be a model minority, and usually Asians are the ones that are considered to be the model minority. But it's just this idea that like, you're going to be, if you do this, or you're perfect, or you're wonderful, then, and you do enough, that you're an exception to the rule. And I think we really get this into our psyche that we need to be doing all of these different things. And I feel like right now, like people of color, queer people, Black people especially, we need to lean out. We need to stop trying to be so excellent, because racism is not going to be erased by our excellence.
Huh. So is there an element in what you're calling Black excellence that is
It's perfectionism.
it's perfectionism? It's if I achieve higher and higher, I'll rise above the group of people that I'm in that racism is visited upon.
Sure. And that's, I think, a lie that white supremacy tells us.
Huh.
And I'm thinking about the book, I just read this book, Behold the Dreamers, that talks about some African, it's a fiction, it's a novel, but it talks about an African family that comes here. And I don't want to give away the whole book, but I would say it's excellent. It examines this idea. And yeah, I think white supremacy tells us this lie that if I just do all of the things, and I find especially Black women, but I think that marginalized people in general feel like they'll come into my office often, and this is where I start working with people, is they come into the office and they're exhausted, and it's because they're just doing too much.
Mm-hmm. You said Black excellence is a result of white supremacy. Is it basically like asking or telling people to conform?
Yes.
Like be not what you are, be this
Yes.
different thing so you don't stand out.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean the second part of his line, why do Black people always feel they need to be excellent? Why can't we just be ourselves?
Yes.
And I feel like hearing that line, it's not saying don't be excellent. It's saying be yourself. If yourself rises to excellence, that's great. But if you're doing it outside of yourself, if you're doing it to achieve assimilation or an integration, I can't remember the difference, but being a part of a group that you're not a part of, that's making you be a part of it. He's crying out against that.
Yes. Yes.
A little bit later here, this is the second quote because I feel like it rolls really, really well following that first one. He says, I'm used to saying that I'm okay, even when I'm not.
Sure. I think that is like definitely the human condition.
What is that? Where does that come from? I think you're right. That's a natural. I hear that getting called out in Americans a lot.
Yes.
Hey, how are you? It's almost like just saying hello.
Yes.
I'm doing great is almost like saying hello back rather
Yes.
than, no, I really want to know.
Yes.
But I feel like with him saying that, maybe because of the story, maybe because of the character, I don't know. But in the context, it means more than just I'm used to saying okay as a greeting back.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think we just say that I think that we say that we're okay. I think also like sometimes, in the arena of race, I would say that this comes up for me. And sometimes I just think that people probably have no concept of what it is like carrying all of this. And so I will say that I'm okay because like, I just don't even want to put that on you. Like, I don't want you to have to.
Yeah. When you say put it, I mean, I'm inferring that you're saying like, because of the multi-layered complexity of a person of color's experience, just being a person,
Yes.
on any given day, in the past hour, things could have been great. But how are you? Well, I'm dealing with systemic racism. I'm dealing with,
Yes.
I'm okay. There's so many layers that are going on that in the book, Me and White Supremacy, the author starts by saying, I'm writing this book because I want to be a good ancestor.
Yes.
And I know that like we as modern people, because of the places that we've come from, the definition I would say of white privilege is, you know, a white person doesn't have on their back the weight of a system from the past. Like white privilege is the privilege of never thinking about it
Yes.
versus, as I understand, because I've never lived this,
Hmm.
a Black person constantly lives with the knowledge of the past 400 to 500 years, everything that's happened in this country, everything that is still happening in this country, everything that could happen in this country that is related to their skin color.
Yes. And I think that that is why, you know, I was thinking about this at the beginning of this last part of the conversation. I think that this is why, when I was saying, like, oh, I don't want to put all that on you, I think that this is why it is so important. I'm going to say for therapy now, I'm going to bring this back to therapy because this is therapist theater. As a therapist, I really think that it is so important for us to have representation. And this is why I do the work that I do. Is because I think that, so I currently, um, the majority of the people that I work with are people of color. And I think that it is so important to be able to sit with a person of color so you do not have to explain a lot of stuff or also feel like I'm being a problem or I'm being too negative when I say all of these things that are going on.
Relating that back to that line, why, how, all of the question words, would a person think I'm being too negative?
Because that's what white supremacy does. When people are talking about it all the time, I mean, we're having that discussion right now in the news, you know, and we're having people say, you know, as a Black person, if you bring up the ways in which racism is affecting you, then there's always this thing of like, you're being angry, you're being upset, you're dressing,
Tone policing.
you're making everything about color. Why do you,
Yeah.
not even just tone policing, just, I mean, I have, you know, friends that are white, and like if I try to even point out sometimes like something you've done that or something you said that I don't like, it's like, well, you know, I was just trying to be nice.
It's Leanne always says impact over intent.
Yeah.
Like you may have meant something one way, but that's not the impact that it had. And the
Sure.
impact matters more than the intent that it was
Mm-hmm.
coming from.
Mm-hmm. And I will have people come in my office and be like, something has happened to them, you know, maybe they've had some type of racial trauma, some type of systemic issue, and they'll be like, I'll be like, well, you know, the person, you know, tell me about what happened. Well, the person, you know, they called me in and they asked me about it, or a friend talked to me, and I just didn't say anything because I didn't want, you know, I just didn't want to get into it. You just get exhausted. You get exhausted from having to defend and explain, because you don't know where the person is coming from. And I think like something that I have started saying to people is right now where I'm at as a person, just as a human being with racial stuff, I'm no longer trying to make people understand.
Well, it's not your job.
It's not my job to make people understand. And like, I think that the most powerful thing that we as human beings can do, we keep on, you know, you hear this word decolonization all the time. And I feel like the work that I'm doing with,
Well, by the way, I don't know if most people hear that word all the time.
okay,
I
well,
think that might be for those of us that are like doing our own anti-racism work, or those of us in the mental health field where we deal
sure,
with relationships all the time. We hear that, but I can guarantee you that my family back in West Columbia, South Carolina, has never heard the word decolonization.
right, right. I think, yeah, I mean, I've been hearing it thrown out around a lot, and I think that it's great. We do need to stop colonizing. We need to stop the act of colonization.
Which is another, it's a way, it's a form, it's a part of white supremacy
Sure.
It's basically making everything, it's white centering. It's
Not just white centering, like, it's white centering, but it's white pushing in, taking
yeah,
over. If you think
yeah,
about colonizing a land and you think about coming to a land and taking it and stepping here and going, this is my white people land, it's that act. And
yeah,
so I think that it has sunken into our psychology, into our minds, into our way of behaving towards each other. And so I think that, James Hollis talks about, he's not even talking about race. He's just talking about how in relationship we have it this deep part of our identity, or not in our identity, in this deep part of our way of relating to other people. And it happens a lot in romantic relationships, this desire to colonize the other person. We want the other person to see things the way that we see them
mm-hmm.
and do things the way that we do them and think the way that we think. And in order for a healthy relationship to happen, we have to grieve the fact that the person is not going to be us and they're not going to see us in that perfect way that a parent does. That's a gift that we can give ourselves and then come as a whole person to this other person. And so I have been really thinking a lot about, like, instead of me constantly trying to explain race to people, what are the ways in which I'm colonizing the people that I work with, that I'm colonizing the people around me, and how can I work to re-indigenize myself, getting more in touch with my instincts, who I am as a person, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not decolonization, because you got to deconstruct and then you got to reconstruct.
Yeah.
So
Although
I
I want to say that, like, I have a little bit of fear of you even using the decolonization term in regards to yourself, just because that is such it's called what it is because of white supremacy.
sure.
Like, so I get what you're saying. You're talking about differentiation. You're talking about knowing where you end and other people begin, and not trying to force your beliefs on them and make them
Right.
conform to you. But that's not the same as decolonization, because you're not sitting in the privileged seat
Sure.
of,
Sure. Sure.
but I get the principle behind what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I think of myself as being the colonized person,
Yeah.
the
So
person
how
that's
can a
facing white
colonized
supremacy.
person also colonize others?
Oh gosh,
That's a genuine question.
I think that we do. That's part of the problem. I think that it's in our psyche, like we do. I think that this has become a part of the United States. Like we have, I don't think we can do it at a large level, but I think that the problem is that we all have picked up on some of the behaviors.
I
And
get what you're
so
saying.
it shows up in this, right? Because we're talking about colonization over a long period of time. This is something that has been happening, I guess, probably since we stopped being hunter gatherers. And now it's a white supremacy thing and it's imperialism that's happening. So I don't think we colonize on a large level, but I think sometimes we've, I guess, taken in some of those toxic ways of relating
Yeah. One of
to
the
each other.
guests that I've had on before, Priska, who is an activist, she talked about a person participating in their own oppression. And I
Yes.
remember when she said that, something coming up in me like, no, people can't, like, which what would I know? I'm a white, middle class, cisgendered male. Like, I mean, what do I know about oppression? But I remember she talked about that, and she talked about how it was the result of when you've been a part of a system and on the bottom of a system for so long,
Mm-hmm.
you're taught that this is how things work. And so whenever you take part in that oppression, it's not like you're saying, oh yeah, cool, let me keep the bad thing that's happening to me going. You're just saying, I, I'm a part of reality. This is just how reality is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because you've been there for so long, it's how you think things are supposed to be.
Yes. 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 And so
Ugh.
I wanted to stop for myself and other people focusing on the colonization because I can feel like that can be sometimes disempowering. I think it's good to recognize.
That's probably the
But
definition of colonization, is disempowering. Yeah.
yeah, and so I was like, what do we need to be working towards? I want to be
Hmm.
working towards re-indigenizing myself.
I like that. Yeah, you and I have had so many conversations about that relate to that,
Mm-hmm.
of you choosing yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful thing. There's the last quote that I wrote down, speaking of beautiful things, is towards the end of the movie. It's not at the end of the movie, but it's Queen kind of saying what she wants. And she says, I want a guy to show me myself.
Mm-hmm.
I want him to love me so deeply that I'm not afraid to show how ugly I can be.
Yes.
I want him to show me scars I never knew I had, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't want him to make them go away. I want
Mm-hmm.
him to hold my hand while I nurse them myself. And I
Uh-huh.
want him to cherish the bruises they leave behind.
Uh-huh.
Whew.
Mm-hmm.
That to me is on that tightrope that is when I'm in a love relationship, maintaining my separateness while embracing my togetherness.
Yes.
That's freaking beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then in one of the last scenes of the movie, where they are confronted by the police on the runway,
Mm-hmm.
holding hands,
Mm-hmm.
and Slim looks at her and says, I would have kissed every one of your scars.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I was tearing up, and she looks at him and says, I'm your legacy.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're gunned down.
Mm-hmm.
They're gunned down. The police officer that shoots Queen, when the camera goes back to that officer looks surprised that she just did it.
Mm-hmm.
She fired her gun and then looks shocked that she fired her gun.
Mm-hmm.
And then when she falls to the ground, the Queen, not the officer, and he embraces her body
Mm-hmm.
and then picks her up and begins walking towards the police. He's carrying the body of the person that he loves. They continue to shout, don't take another step forward or we'll shoot. And then they shoot him.
Mm-hmm.
They don't shoot him, they light him up. I mean,
Mm-hmm. They lit him up.
they lit him up. And then towards the end of this is the end of the movie. We see, I don't know if it's both of their funerals, but his parents are there and her uncle's there.
Mm-hmm.
Which, by the way, her uncle was one of my favorite characters in the movie.
Joaquin Woodbine is the bomb.
He is incredible. I love watching him.
Mm-hmm.
I think the first time I remember seeing him was in Ray.
Mm-hmm.
He was in Spider-Man Homecoming. And he's in this. But he was there wearing a black fur coat. And then Slim's parents were there. But then after that, we see a group of like 4 people putting up a mural. That's the picture of them on Uncle Earl's car.
Yes. Yeah.
And so I'm imagining what has happened is that they have become a symbol.
Yes.
Much like George Floyd has become, much like Breonna Taylor has become, much like Elijah McClain has become. So many people who have lost their lives.
Sasha-Nicole Cory, she didn't lose her life, but I was thinking about Sasha-Nicole Cory during this movie.
They mentioned her in the movie.
Oh,
about how she went to Cuba. Yeah. That's why he had the idea of Cuba.
Yes. I didn't know that was why he had the idea of Cuba.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't remember that part of it. But yeah, that was what made me think of it, because I remember that all of the Black Panthers went to Cuba. Mm-hmm.
I feel like as a white person watching a movie like this, it does, we've talked about both of our feelings in regards to this, but it does make me just angry because I see this and say it's not fair, although I've never had to live on the not fair side of it. I mean, I have lived on the not fair side of it because my privilege is not fair, but I've never had to live on the oppressed side of it.
One of the parts that I loved about the movie, when you're talking about that and I was trying to figure out how to get into this part of.
Yeah.
You're talking about this piece where he was like, or when Angela was like, oh, how she wants someone to love her.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, like I said, I saw the movie from a point of view of being about love.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I saw represented in the movie a few times, and I want to talk about this scene, was India Moore, just amazing. India Moore is the person who was the one that was helping Angela with her braids. One of the women that was with the
Uncle Earl.
Uncle Earl. And I don't know if you knew this, but one of the things that was phenomenal and dope for me about the movie that made me want to bring this up was the fact that they had India Moore in the movie, because India Moore is a trans person.
No.
Amazing actress. And I was like,
Wow.
yes, actor, amazing actor. And so, yes, I was like, they brought it all in this movie. And I love India Moore. They're just so beautiful, just such an amazing person. If you have a chance to read their story, just amazing.
I'm looking at IMDb right now, and I recognize the character you're talking about. Yeah.
They are amazing. I was like, yes, and just looked fire in the movie. But I loved the intimacy of the scene when India Moore was taking the braids out of her hair and doing her hair. I just loved that. Was such a loving scene. I loved the pattern of the dialogue between the two of them. And I don't even know how to explain this. And I tried to figure out a way to explain it when I was discussing the movie with people when I watched it the first time. And then this time, the people in the movie were not sweet with each other. They were loving with each other. And other than Ernest, most of them were not soft-spoken or gentle. They were really loving with each other and they were kind, but they were a little bit prickly with each other because everybody was in fear, right? They were in all of these anxious circumstances. And I loved that this is another reason why I said I experienced the movie as relaxing. No one was like saying to this one, like any of the other people, they were not like making a huge deal out of people responding in the ways that they do and being like, you're being too angry. And I feel some of the way in which I code switch is not just with grammar. I feel like a lot of times when I'm around white people, I hold back my genuine response to things or my anxiety or my.
Is it because you're afraid of getting tone policed?
Yes.
Yeah. So in case somebody's hearing this and you're not familiar with the term, tone policing is typically done by the person holding the privilege. Not typically. It's done by the person holding the privilege. And it's basically saying to another person, I refuse to hear the message of what you're saying because I don't like the way that you're saying it. And that's typically done by saying, like, you're speaking too aggressively to me. You're speaking too angrily to me. You're speaking too loud to me. And it's a way of saying to somebody, you don't get to feel your feelings the way that you feel them. Go and sort them out and bring them back to me in a clean way that's not, I'm going to use the word threatening, that's not threatening to me. So it's enforcing privilege. It's enforcing supremacy because there's no way to do that unless you're saying I'm more important.
Yeah, that's a really good explanation of it. And I think that that's something that I try to work in my therapy room towards creating an environment where people can have that kind of intimacy with me, where I'm not tone policing them, where they don't feel like they have to bring it to me in a certain way. And I feel like there's a certain banter in which people of color interact with each other that can probably sometimes be observed. And I don't think this is only true to Black people. Can be observed by outsiders as being maybe aggressive with each other. And some of it is playful. And so there were just little small things in the movie, like I'm thinking about when they were kind of bantering with each other with the braiding of the hair. And there's also like, I was thinking about how there's a room given that like, if you're tripping right now and you're in a bad place, I can't also be in a bad place. I'm going to come back at you with playfulness rather than being you know what I mean? I'm going to recognize that, and I'm going to be kind of funny. And I thought it also came up when they were, I saw it in two other places. I saw it one when Bokeem Woodbine was talking to Ernest, and he said, "I'm not your uncle."
He's giving the keys to the car, yeah.
But he still hugged him anyway,
Yeah.
and gave him the keys to the car. And I thought also it came up in the back seat of the car when he was trying to get Angela to go into the little live music venue, little juke joint is what I call it. And she was in the back seat, and she was kind of like being grumpy, and she was pouting in the back window, and she was like, "I'm not going in." And he just kept talking to her and kind of recognized, oh, she's feeling anxious. And I think often what happens, especially to women of color, is that often our anxiety is read as anger and aggression.
Wow.
It's pretty dehumanizing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think everything that you're saying is a great example of systems theory, because nobody ever voted on how those things happen. Nobody ever said, if I come at you with aggression, I'm going to come at you with playfulness. I'm going to teach you that pattern. I think you're right. I think if a white person were to observe like Black people interacting, they may go, oh my gosh, like they're mad at each other or this, that, or the other, when it may not be true because they are not a part of systems that function in the same way.
Correct.
But they're trying to, and this is something that Malcolm Gladwell said in Talking to Strangers, they're trying to take a template from their system and they're trying to put it down on another system and say, my understanding and my intuition and my read of this situation is correct, and I will uphold this interaction based upon my understanding that comes from my background. But that's not where this person's background is. And so they don't have that same template on top of them. Yeah.
So people are often scared of me. They'll say that I'm intimidating, which you know me. And I mean, sure, I can be assertive, but I'm a pretty gentle person, I would say.
I was intimidated by you the first time we met. It wasn't because you're a person of color. It's because I looked at you. You were so impeccably dressed the first time that I saw you in this like amazing dress. You had a bow in your hair. Your tattoos are blazing. Like, and I was just like, who is this badass that I am going to work alongside? Like, I come from, so like one of my negative core messages that I fight against every day is I always start from a position of being wrong or being less than. So I looked at you the first time we met and I was like, well, she's got everything together. Here's another opportunity for me to feel like a piece of crap. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't think that's not usually the feedback I get. Usually I get, you're scaring me.
Yeah.
You're mean.
Yeah. I don't think I've ever thought that in our entire friendship. Yeah. 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 You're so far away from mean.
I have had the police called on me for being scary and mean. Like, I've had the police called on me just for asking to speak with customer service, really being a Karen, quote unquote. And I've had the police called on me.
Yeesh. Sasha, before we shift into the next part of the conversation, is there anything else that you want to touch on from this movie?
No, I want to emphasize that part, that if people are watching the movie, to see the love in little interpersonal exchanges. I thought that was such an important part of the movie, and I don't want the trauma of the events in the movie to take away from that.
Yeah. And the love, it grows throughout the movie between them. between them interacting with other people. I'm just thinking of Uncle Earl mainly.
Yeah. The people at the club.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The bartender says, it's okay, you're safe here.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
When I saw them at the club, that's when I knew that they were going to die at the end of the movie.
Really?
I don't know. I just thought, like, they're having all this fun. This is leading up to them having a bunch of fun before they die. That's what I thought. I thought they're not going to make it out.
Well, let's shift into, I'd love if you could tell me something that you've learned from your clients.
Oh, so much. I think that I have learned, especially in this last year of therapy, and one of the things that I think connects to this movie is we were talking about re-indigenizing, and I think that I've learned how to show up as myself in the therapy room. You know, I'm a pretty new clinician. I think I'm second year, going, into the second year of being a therapist or being a clinician. We're not a therapist yet because we're not licensed. And I think I'm learning that my clients have given this really great gift of that when I just show up as myself, it is so much easier. I think I had a conversation with you recently about how I'm not code switching anymore. And it's really been nice and really relaxing. And I've been able to just feel like I'm getting work done and my clients are getting work done in this interactive process. And that's been just amazing.
Let me nerd out on you a second. So code switching. The movie X-Men First Class. Did you ever see it?
I did.
Okay. There's a scene where Magneto confronts Mystique. She is like lifting weights or something. And she is in her Jennifer Lawrence form. And he talks to her about, like, why are you upholding that appearance? Why aren't you being your true self?
Yes.
And whenever she, like, switches back to her blue form, she can hold the weight up more easily because so much of her energy is going towards upholding this appearance that is not truly her. So when you talk about, like, part of your personal work is stopping the code switching, and you found that you're able to be in a more relaxed state, that makes the most sense in the world. Because you're no longer, like, partitioning part of your energy and part of yourself to go towards this upholding of something that you're not. Can you tell me something that you do to take care of yourself?
I rollerblade.
What? For real?
For real.
I want you to know that you're not even the first guest in the past couple of weeks that said that. Aaron Bird said that he has been roller skating as a way of taking care of himself, and I love it. I love it because I can't do it.
Okay. Yeah, I love roller skating and I love rollerblading, and that's what I do for fun to take care of myself. And of course, the other thing that I do for fun and to take care of myself is spending time with Percy, the dog. That's my therapy dog.
Who is the most precious being.
He is.
Ever.
He helps me take care of myself even in sessions. He's just such a big help.
Yeah. I love dogs in therapy so much. I wish that our dog could become that. He is just a ball of energy and a delightful goof, and so he wouldn't. Let's say that somebody was listening to our conversation today and is just thinking to themselves, as they should, that Sasha is the best and that they would love to become your client. How could they get a hold of you?
They can get a hold of me. I'm at the Works Counseling, and my cell number is 615-570-2690. And they can call me or send me even a text message. That's my work number. And my email address is snc@workscounseling.com.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Sasha, as always, I love you. I am just in awe of you. I think you're amazing and brilliant, and just am so glad that you're in my life.
I love you too.
Thank you so much for coming on. I can't wait till round 3. I need some time between round 2 and 3 though, because heavy movies.
Yes. Yes.
But
yes.
important movies. Like I would say, I think one of the benefits, so really one of the reasons why I want to use movies to have these conversations is because by nature of what a story or a movie is, it allows you to put yourself into the point of view of somebody that you're not.
Yes.
And so, you know, I would really be interested in talking to a person that could watch this movie, a white person that could watch this movie and not have been able to understand the experience of these characters.
Mm-hmm.
No, understand that's too big. At least see the experience.
Sure.
I think it's going to take some discussions and some work to maybe understand. And even then, there's no way a white person can ever fully understand.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But at least see and begin the work.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. Thanks for being so willing to bring this and to talk about this. And
yeah, I enjoyed it. I appreciate being able to talk about it.
yeah. All right. Thank you so much.
Talk to you later.
Thanks so much for joining me this week in the theater. I'll make sure I save a seat for you and a friend next week. Let's raise the lights, lower the curtain, and say that for this week, the theater is closed.